Alright folks, so welcome to a walkthrough of the final project, hopefully sort of from the perspective of a student going through this. So the first thing I'm going to start with, I've chosen to focus, you can see here I've selected the search flights endpoint. This is an API from Priceline.com. It's one of the ones we have on our list. I've done a little bit of tweaking. You'll notice I changed the departure return to a date in the future. You'll notice I changed the, let's see, where is it? The location arrival to San Juan County, and the important one, the date of departure, is August 29th. So I should change this to the 31st. Let's see how that works. So this one in particular, and there are many endpoints like this, where you'll need some kind of tweaks to some of the query string just to make the API work. This tends to be true with things like the Billboard API, which requires a specific date, and that date can't be in the future. Or a case like this, where if you're making a booking, the date can't be in the past. Otherwise, you'll just get a little server error, and that's something that students might notice. So I'm going to test this endpoint just to make sure it's working. Click that button in the top right, and we just wait a moment. Sometimes, especially with these bigger APIs, which is probably going to kick back a whole lot of results. We're going to get a lot of results. So looking at this one, first of all, I note the 200 OK in the results column. This means that everything worked. I did not run into a server error. My API is online and all that good stuff. Looking in here, I see the first thing here is airline. That's just got some information about different airlines that run these flights. I probably don't need that. I probably don't need airport. In fact, what I'm interested here in is listings, which is this 40 item bit, and I'm going to just keep that in the back of my mind for later, because this data is pretty nested. Listings are within this overall key of data, so I'm going to probably want to remember that. Looking through here, I see a couple variables that seem like they might be relevant. I have total price with decimal, which I think is the cost of the flight. I have, looking down here, it looks like I've got an operating airline, in this case F9, I believe is Frontier Airlines, so I've got that one there. As we go through, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I probably don't care about quite as much. Here's the actual full name of that airline, and then as I keep going, I think I get into the next one. Yes, this is a flight run by United. So as I keep going, I'm going to run into these different listings, but it looks like this API is working and giving all the stuff I want it to. So at this point, I'm going to move over to EduBlocks, although before I leave Rapid API, let me go to Code Snippets, let me make sure this says Target Python, and let me make sure this says Client Requests. And now all of this code down below should play really, really well on the EduBlocks end of things. Okay. The next step will be to actually move these code snippet pieces over to our program in EduBlocks. So I've got an example EduBlocks program here. I think I've tweaked this slightly from what the final project is, just to recreate it. But what I'm going to do is grab the URL over from here on the Rapid API side, copy that in where it says URL here. I'm going to look in here for the headers. This should include both my Rapid API key and also the host URL. Paste that in. That's actually going to go a little off the screen. If you hit enter, that should just kick it back. And the query string. The query string here is actually quite long. I've put in a whole bunch of different pieces. So I'm going to copy all that, paste in here. Yeah, huge query string. Again, I'm going to press enter, and that's going to kick me right back. So right now I've got all my information in as I think it should work. I'm fingers crossed that this is going to run. And let me just run this and see if we get a JSON out. It may take a minute, as we saw on the other side. What I'm looking for here, hopefully, is for a whole bunch of JSON. So, on running this, what I got was actually an error. I have a key error in here. I left the results in here. This is an API that doesn't actually seem to use results in the kick of its response. So, I'm actually going to just leave that as is. I may need to modify my JSON statement. So let me run it again. Let's see what we get back. Okay, and what we're seeing now is some really good JSON output. I mean, actually this looks terrible. I think you might agree with me, but we are getting what appears to be properly formatted JSON, which means that the API stuff on the Rapid API side is all working, but also EduBlocks is able to get in and get that data. So the next thing we're going to do, and I'm going to modify my code slightly in this next portion, is I don't want to print out the whole my.json. I'm instead going to replace that statement with a list of the variables I really care about. This list of variables is actually built into the example program that the students have for the final project. I'm going to build one from scratch really quick, so let me pause for 1 second while I do that. Okay, and after making some changes, here's what I've got. So I'm going to have this print out price, duration, and name. You'll notice that I have a print line that just lists those three variables before the for loop. And within the for loop, I reference the actual variable name of each of those variables. Now this data set in particular had a ton of nesting to it. You'll notice that in the data itself, all the flights were actually listed within data and within listings. Within that listings set, there was to get to price, we had to go within total price with decimal and price. Within, to get the minutes, the duration of the flight, we had to go within slices, something called 0, and then, or slice 0, and then the duration of the flight in minutes. And finally, to get the name of the airline, we had to go to airlines, then to 0, then to the name of the airline. So this was actually fairly involved for this data set. Be prepared if students use this price line data set, very, very nested. We are going to run this, see if it works. Again, this will take a moment. This is typical. By the way, I will just say, while we're waiting for this to run, this did take a fair amount of guess and checking. And now, finally, we're getting to the point where we have a program that is actually running. I would say it's not necessarily going to be true that students are going to get this the first go around. If it feels like they're spending a couple rounds debugging, that is totally fine and to be expected. So my next stage is going to be moving all of this data over into CODAP. The easiest and most reliable I've found to do this is to copy all of this, copy all of this text all the way up to price, duration, name. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to move over to my CODAP window, and I'm going to click the table button and new from clipboard. This should take what I copied and paste it right in as a table. In this case, I've got 40 cases. Each case has a price, a duration, and a name. This will allow me to start making graphs. So for this case, I don't have too many variables. Most of our students will probably have more to have sort of these multifaceted questions that we're asking them to create. But at this point, I'm going to go in and make a graph. One of the things I'm really curious about is if there's a relationship between the duration of the flight and the price of that flight. And in this case, it actually looks like there is. The longer durations are leading to generally higher prices. If I want to quantify that, I could slap a least squares line on here. It looks like sort of for every additional minute of duration, the price goes up by about 34 cents. Another thing I might care about is, I'll make another graph, blow this up a little bit. I might care if the different airlines are charging different amounts for their flights. So here, I might throw price, let's see how this looks. I'll throw price on the x-axis, and then I'm going to throw the name of the airline on the y-axis. And what I can see is that it looks like Alaska is generally charging the most. Pretty wide range in the middle there for Delta, Frontier, and American both have one cheap flight and one expensive flight, it looks like. Hawaiian, again, quite expensive, and United, fairly cheap, actually, kind of across the board. If I wanted to quantify this, I can click on the ruler icon and show something like a mean. Maybe I want a box plot to show these ranges, so I'll actually get rid of the mean because that's a little busy. And there's other things I could do that would sort of help me show, you know, if I want to see, this is kind of ridiculous, but you can plot a normal curve on top. I don't think we should do that in this case because these are all very asymmetric. But the box plot actually feels pretty helpful. Maybe I just want to compare means, maybe I just want to compare medians, but this could start to give me a sense of which airlines are charging the most for this round-trip flight and which ones are charging the least. just based on this analysis, and if I look in here, I see that United has a median, I think, and a mean of 86.5. That does seem to be lower than all the other ones. And if I was writing up my project, I could list off some of these means, some of these medians, to give folks a sense for just how big that difference was, and what that would lead me to conclude. For instance, in this case, my motivation for this whole project was trying to go visit my brother in San Jose. So I think, United Airlines seems to be the preferred airline for me to make that trip cheaply.